In the quiet suburb of Shadow Valley, a family tried to start anew. John and Mary, with their 3 small children, had just moved from the bustling metropolis to a house with a garden Mary described as peculiarly charming. The garden was adorned with ancient, weathered stone statues that John found a bit macabre, but his wife loved them, saying they gave the place character. He didn't mind, less work for him. A few days after moving in, John noticed something odd. One of the statues, a marble angel with broken wings, was facing away from the house. He was certain they had all been facing forward. Mary, engrossed in unpacking, barely paid attention. John tried to blame it his son, Peter, a mischievous 7-year-old, but Peter denied it with a sincerity that convinced him. The next morning, the scene repeated itself. Another statue had shifted position, and John's heart pounded. He started checking the garden every morning. With each new dawn, a different statue would turn, slowly and methodically. The feeling of being watched, even in daylight, became unbearable. The family was struggling financially, and the pressure of work only added to their anxiety. Moving was not an option. The tranquility was shattered when, one evening, John looked out the kitchen window. All the statues were lined up, right at the edge of the house, like a silent stone platoon of observers. A chilling shiver ran down his spine. It felt like a nightmare materializing before his eyes. With his heart pounding, he ventured into the garden, armed only with a flashlight. The statues were incredibly heavy, unmovable. It was impossible for one person to move them alone. Mary joined him, pale and wide-eyed. She suggested it might be the neighbors, but the idea of someone doing such cruelty to a family with children disturbed her. The police were called, but they could do nothing but suggest security cameras, something the family couldn't afford. John and Mary did everything to hide the incident from the children. For a few days, nothing happened. Hope began to bloom, a fragile flower amidst the fear. Perhaps the pranksters had been scared off by the police presence. John tried to convince himself. The weekend arrived, and John decided to take the children to play in the backyard. The joy of seeing the children laughing was crushed by a terrifying sight. On the back wall of their house, the words "Go away" were spray-painted in large black letters. John nearly dropped his son when he saw it. Without thinking, he ushered his kids and wife inside and ran through the garden screaming threats. But there was no one. The police returned, but with no leads, there wasn't much they could do. The idea that teenage delinquents could be behind something so sinister was unacceptable to John. He promised his wife that if anything else happened, they would move, no matter the cost. That night, Mary's sharp scream cut through the silence. In the backyard, 5 figures wearing white masks danced in strange, almost robotic movements. John grabbed the biggest kitchen knife and ran outside, screaming like a lunatic. But it was 5 against 1. He retreated, like a coward, back inside. The figures stopped dancing and disappeared into the garden. The police arrived, conducted a thorough search, but found nothing. Determined to protect his family, John bought and installed security cameras the next day. Mary was hysterical, begging him to move, but he convinced her to wait. The cameras seemed to have worked, as the intruders never returned. But the explanation never came.
Weeks turned into months of an illusory peace. The statues remained still, the graffiti was removed, and life seemed to return to normal in Shadow Valley. The children played in the garden again, and Mary finally began to enjoy the house. But John, even with the security cameras and the apparent tranquility, never felt completely safe in his own home again. Every shadow, every nocturnal sound made him look at the monitoring screens waiting for the inevitable. He became a prisoner of vigilance, a man who could no longer sleep soundly. One night, while checking the cameras, John saw something that chilled him to the bone. In the recordings from the previous week, a dark silhouette moved silently among the statues. It was not human. Its form was elongated, disproportionate, and its movements were fluid and unnatural. He tried to speed up the recording, but the figure seemed to move in real time, a spectral presence that disobeyed the laws of physics. The silhouette approached the wall where the words "Go away" had been spray painted. To John's horror, the figure had no hands, but its long, thin fingers extended, scraping the stone. The words "Go away" began to appear on the wall, not with paint, but as if they were being carved into the stone with supernatural force. John ran to the backyard, his flashlight trembling in his hands. The statues were still. The camera showed only the empty garden, but the graffiti was there, fresh and chilling. He went back inside, his eyes glued to the screens. The silhouette did not reappear that night. The next morning, an unmarked envelope was found in the mailbox. Inside, there was an old photo of the house. In it, the statues were all facing the house, as they should have been. But hidden in the grass, there was an almost imperceptible detail. A pair of glowing, hungry eyes peering from the darkness beneath one of the statues. On the back of the photo, a single word was written in old, shaky handwriting: "We are here." John felt a shiver of pure terror. That entity wasn't just moving the statues or vandalizing walls. It was in the house before them, observing, waiting. The statues were not the threat, but silent guardians, a boundary that had been violated. The family was never safe. The woman outside the house who thanked him was a bait. She was there for John to trust her. She was part of it. That night, the family gathered in the master bedroom. John tried to act normal, but his eyes remained fixed on the window. He swore he would never feel safe again. Then, he heard a sound. It didn't come from outside. It came from the roof. A slow, dragging scrape. A sound of heavy scratching. He knew. It was the angel. The angel was coming inside. The lights began to flicker, the power failing throughout the house. The scratching intensified, coming from the attic. The children whimpered. Mary clung to them. John knew that the statues, the guardians, were their last defenders. But they were outside, and the angel was inside. A deafening crash came from the attic, followed by absolute silence. Suddenly, the attic door, located in the hallway, slowly opened, revealing impenetrable darkness. John grabbed a fire extinguisher, the only heavy object he had at hand. A tall, slender figure emerged from the darkness of the attic. It was not the stone angel from the garden. It was something far worse. It had the form of an angel, but its limbs were elongated and thin like twisted branches, and its eyes were two empty slits that seemed to absorb light. There were no wings, but the creature floated in the air, moving with a sinister grace. The creature stopped in the hallway, a few feet from the bedroom door. John felt an icy chill run down his spine. It was not the cold of the night, but the cold of death. The creature extended one of its long arms and pointed to the bedroom door. "You shouldn't have come back." A dry, rasping whisper seemed to come from all directions. "The house doesn't like intruders. It wants you. And the statues, they are the portal." Then John realized, the statues were not guardians of the house. They were the keys to the entry of something older, something that had been awakened by the family's move. The statues moved to align the portal, and the graffiti was a warning. The white masks were the faces of those who had already succumbed to the house. The creature took a step forward, and the bedroom door slowly opened. Mary screamed, pulling the children closer. John raised the extinguisher, ready to fight, knowing it was useless. The last thing John saw before the darkness swallowed him was the creature's smile, a lipless grin that revealed a mouth full of sharp teeth. Shadow Valley had finally claimed its new inhabitants.
Taylor and I, a childless couple with a love for rural life, decided to move to New Mexico. As an electrician, I had no trouble finding work. We found an incredible house in the countryside, larger than we needed, but we planned to use it to host friends. A few months later, I started noticing something strange. The upstairs lights would trip, but the rest of the house still had power. Being an electrician, I knew it was an overload problem at the breaker. I decided to investigate the basement. The basement was a tangle of old furniture and discarded objects. I had never spent much time there, just a quick look when the realtor showed us the house. After 10 minutes, I realized where the problem was and decided to fix it later. However, curiosity led me to explore. In the furthest corner, behind stacks of old wooden chairs, there was a huge metal door. It looked industrial, much taller and thicker than normal. It was the kind of door you would see securing a walk-in safe or some kind of panic room. I tried to open it, but the handle wouldn't budge. It was locked. I rushed upstairs and rummaged through the drawer of keys the previous owners had left, but none of them worked on the door. I told Taylor about the door, and she was as curious about it as I was. Somehow, she managed to get in touch with the former owners. That phone call made me more than just concerned. They seemed strange on the phone. Long pauses before answering, as if they were carefully choosing each word. When I asked about the door, there was a tense silence. The wife finally said it was just a safe room for tornadoes and that they had lost the key. That didn't convince me, especially since they had left keys for doors we would never need to lock. The way she said it gave me a terrible gut feeling. The call ended abruptly, without goodbyes. Taylor tried to laugh it off, saying I was overthinking it, but the door wouldn't leave my mind. In the following weeks, I would go down to the basement just to stare at it, wondering what was behind that heavy metal. I tried everything to open it, but the lock was unbreakable. I gave up for a week, but curiosity got the better of me again. 2 days ago, things took a sinister turn. Ignoring Taylor's protests, I hired a locksmith. After half an hour, I went down to check on him. He told me that the lock was unusually complex for a simple panic room. But to my surprise, he managed to crack it after another half an hour of work. I wish he hadn't. What I found inside shocked me. The room looked like a shrine. Old black and white photographs covered the walls, adorned with strange symbols I had never seen. In the center, a chair faced the wall, as if someone had spent hours there, just staring at nothing. In one corner, a cot with crumpled blankets exuded a smell of mold and something more repugnant. Nearby, garbage, empty chip bags, crumpled water bottles. It hit me. Someone had been living there, and not long ago. As if the situation couldn't get worse, I noticed a second door on the right side of the room, small and almost hidden in the dim light. I opened it and found it led to a staircase that went to the outside cellar door. I felt like an idiot. I had never checked that door, assuming it only led to the basement. In all the time we lived there, I had never opened it. My confusion soon turned into pure terror. Someone had literally been living in our house for who knows how long. Several strange things that Taylor and I had noticed began to make sense. Missing objects, the peculiar smell of mold we sometimes felt. It had been them. It had been the occupant of that basement. I tried to call the former owners, demanding an explanation, but they wouldn't answer. Their number had been disconnected, or they simply didn't want to deal with it. Taylor was in a panic, and so was I. That night I dragged heavy furniture to barricade the basement door from the inside. I found a sturdy chain and padlocked it for good measure. No matter what it cost, I wouldn't let anyone get back in through that door. The police came and took a full report, but with no leads. They told us they would do their best to get in touch with the former owners, but it could take days. 2 days passed and we still couldn't contact them. I was furious and horrified. Taylor was a wreck. That night, as we were getting ready for bed, we heard a loud bang on the front door. Lola, our black lab, barked furiously, and we both froze, just staring at each other, listening. After a few minutes, the banging stopped. but then we heard small rocks tapping against our bedroom window. Taylor clung to Lola, and I, furious, went to look. Taylor begged me not to, but I was determined to confront whoever was out there. I grabbed the baseball bat from under the bed and pulled back the curtains, but I couldn't see anything. We thought it was over. Taylor wanted me to call the police, but a part of me wanted to handle it myself. I knew the police would scare them away, and I wanted them caught. I told her that if anything else happened, I would call. Then, from downstairs, I heard the sound of glass shattering. I ran downstairs just in time to see two figures running away from the house. The kitchen window was completely shattered. That's when I called the police, who arrived shortly after. They searched the house and the basement, but there were no signs of forced entry into the safe room. They also didn't find anyone on the property. Their best guess was that whoever had been living down there was angry about being locked out and decided to come back and scare us.
The days dragged on, tense and filled with a disturbing quiet. The police increased surveillance, but the former owners remained unreachable, like ghosts refusing to be contacted. Taylor was a wreck, her eyes always wide, interpreting every creak of the house as a threat. I became a relentless guardian, sleeping little, with the baseball bat always within reach, my ears alert for any sound from the basement. One night, Lola, who had always been a beacon of protection, began to howl. Not a warning bark, but a deep, eerie wail that seemed to come from her gut. The sound awakened me from an uneasy sleep. Taylor was also awake, pale, her eyes fixed on the basement door we had barricaded. Lola's howling stopped abruptly, followed by a dull thud. I rushed to the basement, the baseball bat heavy in my hands. The furniture barricade was intact. The chain and padlock I had placed on the inner door were untouched. But Lola's howl, it haunted me. I couldn't see anything in the darkness of the basement, just the outlines of old objects and the persistent smell of mold. Suddenly, the flashlight beam revealed something. Not on the inner door, but on the outer door, the one leading to the basement through the backyard. The chain was broken, the padlock crushed on the floor as if it had been hit by a colossal force. The cellar door was slightly ajar. The cold air coming from the opening was laden with a smell I didn't recognize, something sweet and putrid at the same time. I called Lola, but there was no answer. A chill ran down my spine. It wasn't possible. I had checked that door hundreds of times. It was secure. Suddenly, a dragging sound came from deep within the basement. The sound of something large and heavy moving in the darkness. I recoiled, my heart pounding, feeling sweat trickle down my forehead. Taylor's voice called me from upstairs, but I couldn't answer. The outer cellar door opened further, revealing a tall, slender silhouette in the gloom. It wasn't one of the figures I had seen before. It was something different. Its arms were long and bony, ending in sharp claws. Its eyes, 2 points of red light that glowed in the darkness, fixed on me. "You didn't fool us," a rough, guttural voice echoed in the basement, seeming to come from all corners. "You trapped us, but the house, it's ours, and what's inside it is also ours." The creature took a step forward, and the flashlight revealed its form. It had no skin. It was just muscle and bone, a twisted abomination that seemed to have been made of nightmares. Hanging from one of its hands, like a broken toy, was Lola's collar. I screamed, throwing the baseball bat at the creature, but it passed through it as if it didn't exist. The creature approached quickly, and I tried to run, but my feet seemed stuck to the floor. The last thing I heard was Taylor scream from upstairs, before darkness swallowed me. The house was not just a shelter. It was a trap, and the cellar's secret had finally been revealed. We were not the owners. We were the new provision.
At 27, the house I had saved so much to buy was a milestone in my life. Having always lived with my parents, 3 siblings, and 2 dogs, I was accustomed to chaos and life. Now, I was alone. The lack of noise was the hardest part of the transition, a silence that felt deafening. Still, there was a small refuge, the second-floor balcony. It was tiny, barely big enough for one person, but it was my sanctuary. Every night after work, I would go out to smoke and clear my head. The balcony was perfect, a luxury that allowed me to smoke without leaving the house. The layout of the houses was standard, side by side, with backyards separated by 10-foot fences. From my balcony, I could see my back neighbor's yard. Weeks went by, and I realized I had met almost all the neighbors except him. He never waved, never appeared in the yard. I never even saw a light in his window. It was as if he didn't exist. The grass in the neighbor's yard was so tall it looked untouched for years, and the silence of his property was constant. Curiosity got the better of me. One Saturday, I decided to introduce myself. I walked around the block to his house, expecting a brief conversation. But the house was a disaster. The paint was peeling, the siding was scratched, the walkway stained. The doorbell was broken, so I knocked a few times and waited. Nothing. I was about to leave, thinking the place was vacant, when I saw a slight movement in the window shade, just a flicker, as if someone was peering out. That was enough. Someone was in there, spying on me, but didn't want to open the door. I turned to leave, when suddenly the door flew open with a bang, slamming against the wall, as if ripped open in a violent rage. I jumped back, startled. There she was, an elderly Asian woman with gray hair pulled back into a tight bun. Her skin was wrinkled, but tense, as if she was flexing her facial muscles. Her eyes were wide, unsettlingly wide. Something about her bothered me. She seemed to be under the influence of something. She didn't say a word, just stared at me blankly. Eventually, I cleared my throat and introduced myself as the new neighbor. After a few seconds, she said her name was Priscilla and gave me a half smile. And that was it. She didn't even ask my name. She just stood there, watching me. I nodded and turned away, not knowing what to say. I left feeling more unnerved than I wanted to admit. I never heard the door close behind me, but I didn't want to turn around and be caught looking. Later that night, I went out to my balcony, as usual, trying to forget the strange interaction. At that moment, I had no idea of the nightmare I had gotten myself into. When I glanced over the railing, there she was, the woman, standing dead center in her yard, looking straight up at my house. She didn't move, didn't call out, just stood there, staring. It was one of those moments where you wonder if you're actually seeing what you think you're seeing. I didn't know if I should say something, wave, or pretend I hadn't noticed her. It was one of the freakiest things I had ever seen, and I didn't know how to handle it. I went back inside and told myself she was just a little messed up in the head, and that I shouldn't be getting worked up over a harmless old lady. But it didn't stop there. The following night, I saw her again, but this time she was moving from one window to another inside her house, watching me from each one. Although I pretended not to notice her, part of me felt like she knew that I knew she was watching. I was hoping she would stop, but she didn't. She was still looking at me when I finished smoking and turned to go inside. Out of curiosity, I peeked out one of my windows about 20 minutes later to see if she was still looking at my house. To my horror, she was. I called my dad,
and he told me that she probably had dementia or something, and that she was most likely just lonely or confused. He told me that I should actually feel bad for her. It was kind of hard to feel bad for someone who was borderline stalking me, but my dad calmed my nerves and assured me that she was harmless. A few nights passed without anything weird happening. I didn't see her in her yard or at any of her windows. I thought maybe my dad had been right and was starting to feel glad that I hadn't done something drastic. That is, until one morning when I found a woman's sock on my side of the fence, just sitting in my yard. I stared at it, feeling a chill run through me. This wasn't just her strange behavior anymore. She had been on my property. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to confront her, but I was starting to feel like I couldn't ignore it either. I should have called the police right then and there, but I didn't because I didn't want to create issues with a neighbor. That night, as I was lying in bed, the doorbell started ringing. Not once, not twice, but at least a dozen times, one after the other. I didn't even need to look. I knew it was her. In my tired haze, I wasn't thinking clearly. I was more annoyed than scared. I got up, threw on a shirt, and went to the door, telling myself I would just ask her to leave me alone. I told myself I had been putting this off long enough, and it was time I dealt with it. I have no idea why I wasn't scared at that moment. I still look back and cringe at how flippantly I handled the situation. I don't even want to say I was naive, but I can't think of a better word to describe my attitude to it all. The second I opened the door, she lunged at me. She ran at full speed at me with a kitchen knife in her hand, her face twisted in rage. She started screaming, yelling something about how she had taken her son from me. I barely had time to process what was happening. I grabbed her arm, managed to wrestle the knife out of her grip, and I pinned her down on the floor. She was easy to overpower, but that didn't make the situation any less terrifying. My heart was racing, and my hands were shaking as I held her there and called the police. She was still screaming nonsense about her son and told me that she was going to kill me. At one point, she tried to bite me, but I wasn't going to let her go until the police arrived. It was the longest 5 minutes of my life. She never stopped screaming or squirming the entire time. When the police finally arrived, they restrained her and forced her into one of their cruisers. She screamed the whole time, and I could still hear her screaming even after they shoved her in the car. I had never been more scared in my life. The police made sure I was okay and told me she would be sent to some kind of psychiatric facility. I never saw her again after that. This incident still weighs heavily on my mind and has definitely made me a more paranoid and cautious person. I ended up moving out less than a year later.
The house seemed like a refuge, but it became a prison. The incident with Priscilla deeply marked me, turning me into a paranoid man, always on guard. I moved, seeking peace in a new place, but the fear persisted, a shadow that followed me. Years passed. I was in a new city, in a new house, trying to rebuild normality. But certain memories never fade. One night, while flipping through old newspapers, I found a piece of news that chilled me to the bone. The house where I had lived, the house next to Priscilla's, had been demolished. The article mentioned a strange discovery during the demolition, a secret room in the basement, sealed with concrete and chains, and inside it, a human skeleton. The name on the record was Priscilla. But how? Priscilla was alive. She had been institutionalized. What had I found? The report continued, detailing Priscilla's story. She had been an ordinary woman until her son, a teenager, disappeared. The police never found anything. Priscilla, devastated, came to believe that the neighbors had taken him. She began to act strangely, and her sanity disintegrated. She built the secret room to protect her son, hoping he would return. The news didn't mention anything about the knife or the assault, only her madness and her missing son. The photo in the newspaper showed the demolished house,
the secret room exposed. On the wall of the room, strange scribbles and symbols, the same ones I had seen in the basement house. My heart pounded. The stories connected in a horrible way. Priscilla's house, the house that had hidden a secret, and mine, which had housed a hidden occupant. That night, I couldn't sleep. The past was catching up to me. I remembered Priscilla's sketch, her appearance, her eyes. It wasn't madness, it was something more. I remembered the sock in my backyard, the "Go Away" graffiti, the masked figures dancing. They weren't teenagers. They were those who lived in the underworld of my neighborhood. The phone rang. An unknown number. I hesitated, but answered. A deep, raspy voice on the other end said, "You found what you were looking for, didn't you? The house doesn't let its secrets be revealed. You opened the door, and now it's open for you too." The call dropped. An icy chill ran down my spine. Priscilla's house, my house, weren't just structures. They were portals. That skeleton wasn't her son. It was the house's first victim. And Priscilla, she wasn't crazy. She was just trying to warn me. She was the guardian of the portal. Suddenly, my new house's doorbell began to ring. Once, twice, a dozen times, like that night. I knew it wasn't a neighbor. I knew it wasn't a mistake. I went to the window and looked outside. There she was, Priscilla. Not the old woman I had restrained, but a translucent, ethereal figure with the same wide, terrifying eyes I remembered. She stood in the middle of my driveway, looking directly at my window. She raised a wrinkled hand, and her lips moved, though no sound came out. But I heard. In my mind, the voice whispered, "He's here. He came for you. He's waiting for you." Behind her, in the middle of the deserted street, a tall, shadowy figure began to materialize. It had no defined form, just a mass of darkness that seemed to twist and pulsate. It had no eyes, but I felt its gaze penetrating me, pulling me into the darkness. The front door creaked, slowly opening. I hadn't locked it. I hadn't locked any door in my new house. Shadow Valley had found its new path. I ran to the back of the house, to the garden. There was nowhere to go. The fences were too high. The walls were solid. I was trapped. I was back, but this time there was no escape. I heard scratching sounds on the roof, the sound of something dragging, coming inside. I heard the cellar door opening, and the smell, the sweet, putrid smell. I turned around, and there she was, the figure of Priscilla behind me. She no longer had the smile, just an expression of pure terror. "It's too late," she whispered, and her form began to disintegrate. The shadow that was on the street was now in my backyard, and it wasn't alone. More and more shadows, each darker and more amorphous than the last, began to fill the garden. They were the true inhabitants of the house, and they were coming for me. The last thing I saw was the main figure approaching, its long, thin arms extending to embrace me, and I knew I was no longer the occupant. I was the next part of the house, the next victim.